Hello, everybody. Welcome to Wholehearted Loving. I'm Stephanie.
Hi, I'm Georgianna.
Today, we are going to be resuming our list of psychological defenses against emotion from Dr. Raja Selvam book, The Practice of Embodying Emotions. Today, we're going to talk about denial, displacement, and projection, which feel to me inextricably linked. But before we begin, we are going to do a body-based self-connection practice to connect with ourselves before we connect with each other and this podcast.
All right. So I walked a group coaching call through this practice and they really enjoyed it. And so I will share it here as well. Just finding your anchoring point. For me, it's feeling my butt on the ottoman. Maybe for you, it's your feet or your hands touching something or your back touching something. And just taking a moment to notice your breath. And then we're going to follow your body's impulse. So, does your body have the impulse for movement, stretching? Does it have the impulse for stillness and a type of holding? You choose, and you may know right away, or you might need to try a few different things to notice what it is that your body wants. And so, just giving yourself time and space to play with that. If you happen to be moving, see if you can feel any places of tension in your body. So what we typically call a stretch, and see if you can stay in that spot where you feel a bit of a stretch for one full inhale and exhale. And then move again and notice maybe another point of tension. And be there for a full breath. If you happen to have chosen stillness or holding, seeing if you can notice a point of contact that your body's making with the surface you're resting on or another body part, and notice that contact point and be there for a full inhale and exhale. If you happen to be moving slowly, you can see if your body wants to move any faster. If you happen to be moving quickly, you can explore to see what slower movement feels like. Oh, I just felt that. And just having a little notice. What's that?
Body wants to make. There are always a lot of stretches my body wants to make.
I'm curious if you're already familiar with making stretches with your body. What is it like to slow it down and pause and be there for a breath before you move again?
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when I shared this in a group, someone had said, I've heard people talk about that a lot. What's your body's impulse? Can you follow your body's impulse? Can you honor your body's impulse? And she's like, I got it, but I felt it this time. I felt what my body really wanted to do. And we talked about how significant that is to learn to notice it and to follow it, especially if you've grown up in situations where there wasn't actually much room for you to follow your impulses. Maybe you got in trouble for that. Maybe it was deemed as bad or shamed as wrong. So it's important to reconnect with noticing body impulses and giving us permission to follow those impulses, and then to notice, when I follow this impulse, does it bring me something good? Or perhaps if maybe it's harmful. Some impulses can not be what we need. Or they might be what we need in the moment, but maybe not what we need long term. So just playing with that, getting to know how it feels to follow impulses.
Mm-hmm. This highlights as well the importance of doing. As if you move in one way, if you think about it, this is again my thinking instead of doing habit. When I do a movement, my body's impulse reveals itself through the act of doing, right? I might not
Mm,
be able to figure out in my brain what an impulse is because I'm just thinking instead of being with, you know?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, because you might do something and it will reveal to you, yes, that's what I want. Or you might do something and it will reveal to you, no, that's actually not it. And then we sort of go on that journey to seek it out. What would feel better?
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, really, this is such a good reminder because I think we work with a lot of people who think that they will solve all their problems and find clarity to all their answers through trying to think about things
Mm-hmm. Or talk about things
instead
or
of,
both.
or
Yeah.
talk about things instead of taking some sort of action and then noticing. Right. So, I'm trying to really instill in my life and in my boys' lives the concept of trial and data. Just do something. Doesn't matter what,
Mm-hmm.
assuming it's not harming anybody, but just try something, do something other than thinking and talking and
Yeah.
see what you notice.
Yeah. This is the power of ritual as well. Like in my mystery school that I belong to in Vancouver, there's it's mainly based in ritual. It's the act of doing, and that causes things to happen energetically or literally. This is a really important thing. It's about more than just slowing down, right? It's discovering information in your body and in your
Hmm.
actions.
Yeah. So this is
Yeah.
great. And someone had also said, oh, it felt really nice to go to move slowly. Like I've moved my body before, she said, but I haven't really quite slowed it down that much. And I haven't paused at those moments of feeling the tension or the stress and been there for a full breath and then shifted to the next movement. And she said it helps me see the value in slowness and how good slowness can be and how good
Mm-hmm.
slowness can feel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Making space. Nice. Thank you, Gigi. Okay. Denial. It's more
just
than
made a
just a
face.
river in Egypt. I can't resist. So we've been making our way through this list of, I think it was 15 common psychological defenses against emotion, ways that we cope with big emotion when we have not yet grown our capacity to be with big emotions.
Hmm.
And the next one in the list is denial. And the subsequent two are displacement and projection. And we're rolling those three together because I think they are linked and they definitely have sort of cross behaviors. We combine these into a beautiful sandwich of denying our emotions.
A denial sandwich? Great.
Yeah.
I've had a
It's gluten
buffet of
free.
denial sandwiches.
So I'll just read through the blurb and then we can kind of talk about how we've experienced denial in ourselves and how we experience it in our work with people.
Hmm.
Okay, denial. Imagine that someone is talking about their mother with an angry tone of voice or facial expression or body expression. If you were to ask that person whether they were angry and they denied it, that would be an example of the coping mechanism of denial. Please note that just because another person can see signs of anger in me, that does not mean I'm aware of it myself. I can deny it because I am not aware of it, or I can deny it even though I am aware of it because I do not want to focus on it or express it because it feels unsafe for me to admit it.
Mm. Yeah.
hmm I'll read the next two blurbs and then we can get into it.
Okay.
Displacement. When we're angry at our boss, but we direct that anger toward our spouse at home, this is an example of the defense of displacement. And projection. When someone describing a scary event perceives the fear only on the faces of those listening, this is an example of projection. I have so much to say.
Where do you want to begin?
I have so much direct experience in these areas. I mean, what this makes me think of immediately is relationship. Um, I project my ideas about how relationships should look, about how people should behave onto the
Mm-hmm.
relationship, which
Mm-hmm.
causes me to effectively be in denial of whatever's actually happening in the
Mm-hmm.
relationship. And then I displace my discomfort about that onto other people in my life, feeling irritated with your partner and instead you're bitchy at your best friend or something like that.
Right. Could you walk us through like a real life example of what you just talked about?
Yeah, for sure. Um, so when I was 14, I dated this guy and we reconnected 20 years later. So all of our ideas about each other were projections from our past, right? We had ideas about how the other person was, and
Mm-hmm.
we had ideas about how relationships ought to be and feel and look.
Mm-hmm.
And as those pictures were not jibing, they weren't matching up.
They weren't matching up with reality.
Yeah, reality was
Okay.
just this wrong, confusing thing that didn't match my script at all. So I was in denial of that. I couldn't see what was in front of me because I was so hyper focused on what I wanted it to be in front of me.
Mm.
And
Can you pause with that for a sec? I think
yeah,
that's so important. I couldn't see what's in front of me because I was so busy. What did you say?
imagining the script was not being played out. I'm like this
Mm.
weird stage manager backstage being like, "You're in the wrong play. Get out of there."
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah.
A lot of denial came up about that. Things were not the way I wanted them to be. At that time, I was not aware of my emotions. I mean, the example they've used here is if you're speaking in an angry tone of voice and not recognizing anger within yourself. At that time, I didn't think that I had any anger. And certainly, if he had said, "You seem pretty angry right now," I angrily would have argued with that. I would have been in total denial about any of my own feelings or fears. I mean, they're big and scary to face, and the more intertwined you are in life and relationship, the scarier that can feel.
Right. I'm curious if we can like do a little playing here. Like, could I give you a prompt around this and you just see
Hmm.
what comes up?
For sure.
Um, Something I was in denial about was, right? Like, so in that context of that reconnecting when you were adults and coming into relationship, can you use that prompt? Is there stuff to say about that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Something I was in denial about was my own needs. Something I was in denial about was my feelings and my fears. Something I was in denial about was how I felt in the dynamic. Um, I believed myself to be in love and I wanted to be in love, and the suggestion that I wasn't would not have penetrated my consciousness at all, you know?
Mm. Hmm.
Hmm.
And if I change up the prompts to the reality was,
The reality was that the relationship did not feel good or healthy. The reality was that I did not know what good and healthy relating felt like. The reality was that good and healthy relating at that time would have felt very uncomfortable for me and been unrecognizable. The reality was that neither of us was truly willing to face what was coming up for us. Mm, I think that kind of runs the gamut.
hmm so Steph and I have use these prompts many, many times. We've facilitated workshops and sessions with clients using these prompts. So this is nothing new to you, Steph. I'm curious, what is it like just in this moment, working through some of those prompts, revisiting an old situation? What do you
Mm,
notice?
clarity. Um, it's very obvious and unmurky to me now what I think and feel and desire and what doesn't feel good to me. And it's a drastic change from what I would have been able to access within myself previously. I remember feeling just confused and like I had to do something, change something, be some kind of way. You know, if I just did X, Y, or Z, then good things would happen.
Right. When in
Very,
reality, it just wasn't in alignment.
yeah, yeah, just that simple. You know, it just wasn't a fit.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I wonder how many people, if they were willing to have that kind of honesty with themselves and their partners, would come to see it really just isn't a fit.
Hmm.
Right. And it doesn't mean like sometimes it might mean this is the wrong person to be with. And sometimes it might mean the dynamic we have right now is not fitting with each other. And is there a willingness on either of us or both of us to shift some of that so that it does fit better?
Hmm. Yeah. This makes me think of flowing and easeful relationships. Like, I think
Hmm.
I'm lucky to have had so many experiences of just clicking with a person and it just feeling right and easy. And I think I've wrongly assumed that everyone has that experience, and I don't know that they do. So to me,
Hmm.
it used to be that if we were in agreement that we desire a relationship, that's all you need, you know, and the rest are just details we can work out.
I
But
remember
now,
that. I remember believing that.
yeah,
Gosh, I was
right?
so wrong.
Yeah. I mean, that's possible. I think certainly there are people with demure dispositions who can make that agreement and never encounter big problems in the future. But I also really believe now that I think I've said this before, I think we sort of all inhabit different dimensions or wavelengths, and we find people who are on that wavelength, or we can try to force things across wavelengths. And I think that's when we really get into some discomfort. And this is, you know, where a wavelength is just simply how we view the world, what we
Mhm.
understand about things, and how we expect or desire to be with others.
I wish in the past, like, I remember feeling so delighted to know that someone who I was in relationship with wanted the same thing. Like in
Mm,
words, said they wanted the same thing. And I thought, oh, I found the person. I found the one. They want the same thing.
right.
And then I realized, oh, like wanting the same thing and then having the willingness and the ability to like lean into the discomfort continuously to create the same thing is very different.
Very different.
And the prompts, along with the ones I just suggested for you, that I think really would have helped me at the time, and I suggest them to people now, is what's not working is and what's working is, right? To be able to really own what's working in this relationship for me right now and what's really
Mm,
not working for me. And I don't think I ever really looked at a situation like that. I just tried to, like, I wanted this relationship to work so badly that I just looked at what was working, and like what was working could have been like tiny, tiny things that I would try to blow up into like big enough things to feel good about the relationship.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think
And that,
that's the way
yeah.
of displacing our feelings, right? Instead of we focus and we try to shift our mindset to, okay, let me just focus on the things that are working. Let me ignore, and it's like having a pros and cons list instead of a weighted pros and cons list where we can notice the importance of certain things, because tiny things working is not going to be enough to sustain a healthy dynamic.
Hmm. Yeah. And having to be willing to face face, like another prompt that we use is, what am I not ready to face or not willing to face? What am I ready to face? I was not ready and willing to face that this was not a good fit.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. I remember, like, just in the beginnings of getting into relationship with this person, I was at like a personal growth workshop weekend, and I was like super into it and really just energized and inspired, and really felt like these are my people. These are people willing to reflect on their own, being and take action in their life. And I thought, this dude would have the most horrible things to say about what I was doing here and be super cynical and negative about this whole thing. And I remember sitting in that chair thinking, I'm a really like growth minded person. I like to think of what's possible. And that's how I like to live my life. And I was facing in that moment, that's not how this person is at all, or how they live their
Mm-hmm.
life. But I was so in love with this person, in love with the idea of this relationship working, that I remember saying to myself, it's okay. I'll find a way. I'll figure out
Mm-hmm.
how to make it work.
Yeah.
But I
It's all just
remember that
details.
moment so distinctly. It was
Yeah.
this uh-oh moment. And I just tried to like bury it. Be like, it's
Yeah.
okay. That's not a big deal.
Right. Yeah.
It was a
Very
big
real.
deal.
It was a big deal. Yeah. Yeah. So you said two things there. Words versus actions. This is such a tricky one. And wanting to want, when someone's faced with like, hey, don't you want to be able to communicate well? The answer's never going to be no, no, babe, I don't aspire to that. Go home. It's going to be like, of course, yes, yes. And I promise, you see this on Have I Ever Mentioned 90-Day Fiance, of people who
Never.
are
You've
like,
never mentioned it. I'm in denial. You've never mentioned it.
he's telling me he's going to do all these things. I saw a woman doing this last week saying, he's promising that all these changes are going to happen. I just need this wedding to happen so that he can make those changes. And I'm like, this is backwards and very relatable and just not going to happen. People are often focused on checklists. That's another thing. He checks off all these boxes. She checks off all these boxes. And the boxes are usually, surfacey relationship things to do with finances and wanting a family. Maybe you might get into things like how you want to communicate. But the proof of the pudding is always in the tasting. The way people are is the way they're generally going to be. And there are definitely circumstances where someone might go, oh my gosh, I hadn't realized that thing was important. And they integrate it into their being and they genuinely shift the way they show up in the world about that thing. But I think that's going to be an exception more than the rule. And all the promises in the world are not going to change the way we interact with one another. You can tell how interactions are going to go by the way that they're happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a big thing. Big thing to give yourself time to observe whether someone's actions match their word
Mm-hmm.
consistently.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
also like to take ownership of yourself. Do I do the things that I say I'll do? And if not, what's behind that? And do I want to shift that, or do I want to continue that pattern? That was not a fun one to look at, but a big one to look at.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Most of
Um,
these things that we're in denial about or displacing or projecting are highlighting some really uncomfortable places within ourselves. Uncomfortable feelings like uncertainty and fear that love might go away. All of these things that if we learn how to sit with and grow our capacity to be with, suddenly there's space for the other person to show up in ways that are authentic to them, and we can actually observe it instead of just interfacing with our hopes for how things ought to be.
mhm. I remember when it comes to denial, being treated not well and really just looking at the moments where I was treated well, or remember 6 months ago when he was so nice to me, and really living in those moments and really not seeing what the current reality was.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a pattern of that growing up. I couldn't look at all the ways that I was not treated well as a child. That would have been too painful. So I grew that muscle of looking for what's good.
Yeah.
But when you go into intimate relationship or any kind of relationship and all you look at is what's good or decent, and you don't let yourself feel or look at what's not working, then you don't actually, your decision making is not based on the whole truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And I also had a hard time. I was in denial about someone's pattern. Like, if I really look at it, you can see this person had the pattern of just avoidance all the time. We could never talk through things. He'd say, "Yeah, I'll call you on Sunday," and it's like 2 weeks goes by and nothing happens.
Mm-hmm.
And I would always make up some excuse. Oh, he's busy, he's probably stressed, he's feeling overwhelmed, this is hard for him. And I'd let it go. And that was a reality I wasn't willing to face. And if
Mm-hmm.
not just with me, how he treated me and what the pattern was, but if I were to look at how he dealt with friendships, how he dealt with career and work, I started to see, like, oh, this is how he deals with all areas of his life. And I wasn't willing to see that, like, if he's dealing with all these other areas of his life this way, he's probably going to deal with relationship in this way as well.
Right.
And it won't change overnight. And that's another thing I think I was in denial about. And I hear this a lot in people. The people who choose to do this inner work, these are really dedicated people. These are courageous people. And they all know that it's a journey. It's not like a one night thing. It's not a 1 month thing. It's a continuous learning to be with discomfort and learning to see yourself through an accurate lens and see people and life through an accurate lens. And when I talk to people about how much time and effort and how consistent they've been in their healing and growth work, they'll all say, yeah, it's been like months or years. And when I ask them, has it been easy, the whole way? No, it's been tough. There's been highs and there's been lows. And then when we reflect on, okay, what do you see in this person you want to have a relationship with, in your partner? Like, are they putting in the effort? Are they using time and making time for this? And are they
Mm-hmm.
taking it as seriously as you? Because if they're not, that's okay. But it's important for you to know that. Like, it doesn't make them a bad person, but it's important for you to face that reality that
Mm-hmm.
patterns are not going to change, even though they might say they want to change. But if you're not seeing sustained action, then you need to face the reality that this change that you're hoping for, dreaming for, is most likely not happening, or
Yeah.
not happening with, in a, some sort of time frame that feels okay for you.
Yeah.
And I was in that. I was stuck in that really deeply, of not wanting to see that because I was afraid of losing connection. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
maybe if I just waited out long enough. He's doing
Right.
a little bit. He's
Yeah.
doing a little bit. He's
Well,
trying.
and maybe he'll go back to, I think this is also a common thing that we hear. They used to be like this, or they used to give me so much more. So we tend to
Mm-hmm.
connect in romantic relationship. I mean, we connect in a honeymoon phase, in a hyper awareness and connection with each other, with all these hormones going on that has very little to do with how a person functions day to day without being in love. Right. So we hearken back to the good old days when they used to do this and that and the other thing. And maybe if I change something or do something differently, they'll go back to that way they were. I think that can
Mm-hmm.
be a really powerful tool to keep us in denial.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Um, there's more denial. I'm like, oh, the denial train is going. There's more. Um, this one was a hard thing for me to realize, like really hard to face as a mom. I remember reflecting, and like there'd be moments where my kids would not be kind to me because they're kids, and that's part of their development, and they're learning still, and they have underdeveloped brains, or like not underdeveloped, they have like developed according to where they're supposed to be at,
Mm-hmm.
and um and I used to have these moments of feeling frustrated with them, or being like, man, that really hurt my feelings, like that's not really okay, and I'd like set a boundary with them, it'd be kind, but it'd be a firm boundary. And then I realized I have higher standards for my children than for this dude who's a grown man.
Mm,
Wow. Okay.
bit of displacement in there, even.
Yeah. I was like,
Yeah.
how can I be so upset with my children and set such a firm boundary of, this is not okay to treat me this way? You can be mad at me, you can be frustrated with me, but you cannot treat me this way. It's
Yeah.
unkind. It doesn't feel good. And yet I was okay with this dude treating me in ways that were just really not okay if I really sat and thought about it and felt it.
Yeah.
And that was a big wake up call for me. I was like, that's total displacement,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
And such a
denial.
neat way of noticing, like, part of the reason you're able to do that with your kids is because you have this degree of connection and safety of communication and being received, that you're able to like deliver a message that is undeliverable over here, you know? That's, I think, a really great cue for us to notice where in our lives we do have that safety and connection, if we're
Hmm.
displacing challenging feelings onto those relationships out of the other ones.
Yeah, that's interesting hearing you say that, because you're right. Like, I felt totally comfortable setting a clear boundary with my kids of like, hey, I see the good in you. How you're talking to me right now, that doesn't work for me. It doesn't feel good. And I need that to change. I couldn't say those 3 sentences to this man I was in a relationship with
Yeah.
because I was afraid. I was like, he's going to leave. He's going to think I'm too much,
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a big wake up call.
Makes sense.
Hmm.
And love and connection. Makes a lot of sense. Mm.
This makes me laugh. I'm remembering, like, sort of on this sort of train of thought, how I had higher expectations of my children to treat me with respect and care than from a partner. And then I was thinking, oh, I actually had higher expectations from a stranger.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
And then I had really had to examine, like, what are my beliefs about myself and what I deserve, where I have the expectation to be treated better by a stranger than someone I'm in
Mhm.
relationship with.
Totally. I remember feeling joy and freedom going to the store because I would have a pleasant interaction with a cashier. I'm like, why can't I just have pleasant interactions at home in this relationship? You know? It was unavailable and I was in denial.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think it's important, like, we're in denial because we deeply long for connection,
Yeah.
right? And so it doesn't make us bad or wrong that we've been in denial. We're in denial because we're afraid to feel things that feel too big and too overwhelming.
Yeah.
Right. So this isn't about shaming ourselves for being in denial, because I think it's easy to go down that route.
Mhm.
Um, I
Well, it's
think
the coping
sometimes one.
tool we have, right? It's the
Hmm.
tool that we have, and so we're gaining new tools and growing different capacities now.
Hmm. When I grew my capacity to be with discomfort, and when I grew my muscle of being deeply supported and held by people, then I was able to feel some of these things that felt really horrible to feel. Even the idea of feeling them felt horrible. This reminds me of in women's group years ago, and we were talking about the experience of being bullied as children. And I remember sharing something, and I said, oh, I don't even think this qualifies as being bullied. It was just one incident with this boy who I thought we were friends. I think it was grade 4, I was 9. And he had, I don't know if it was a G.I. Joe or like some little figurine thing that he was really proud to bring to school. And he dropped it on the ground. And so I went down to pick it up for him. And he either stepped on it or stepped on my hand. I can't remember what he said. And he called me a chink. And I knew in that moment something felt off, but I didn't know what. And then I remember trying just to ignore it and be like, oh, this is my friend. And I just said, oh, I was just trying to give you your toy back. And I think I didn't really think about that for decades. And then I shared that with a group. And she said, hey, love, that's not bullying. That's racism. And I was like, what are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about. And like, that was the moment where I was like, wow, how many moments have I experienced that or witnessed my parents experiencing that in my childhood, where I just brushed it off as nothing. And that was a big piece of denial for me, of not really wanting to look at those moments for what they were and how it really felt to be in that kind of exchange with someone, because it felt too hurtful to see it for what it was. And it felt too big. Like, if I'm going to see this moment as racism, like, how many other moments have I not seen and felt them for what they are? That now I'm going to have my radar on for that. I don't want to have my radar on for that. I just want to live in this fantasy land that everybody loves me and my family and they welcome me into this country and want us to be here. I don't want to live with that idea that, yeah. Anyways, people have said some pretty horrible things to my parents, which I've talked to them about as an adult, but as a child, sort of just tried to pretend like none of that was happening.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, our brains will fracture to protect us from this kind of pain, you know?
Mm-hmm. I remember dating someone in high school, and he and his family were lovely. But he said, I just wanted you to know that my grandpa, who they're very close with, he's really racist. And I remember, I think I just laughed it off.
Right.
And I wonder now, looking back, I'm like, how closed off was I? How guarded was I to that whole experience? That was just something I laughed off and we never really talked about it again, or maybe would have joked about.
Yeah.
But it was never a serious conversation. I never let myself feel anything about that.
Right.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
prime stuff to be displacing unconscious pain about and projecting stories into the future about how people might think and feel.
Big stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
How
it
are you?
really goes to show how powerful of a protective tool it is.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Because I didn't have to feel that for decades. If people would have asked me as a child and as a teenager whether I felt discriminated against, or I felt that my family was discriminated against, or, anything like that, I would have said no. Even when I asked my dad a couple of years ago, he's like, no, it was fine. But then when we talked a little bit more and he told me like events that happen, exchanges that happen, I'm like, Dad, that's not fine.
Yeah.
But, they had sort of just brushed it off too to survive and
Yeah.
cope.
Right. And I bet there's a lot of comparing it to other atrocities that aren't being endured right now. So it can't be that bad. Oh, it could be worse. I can ignore all of
Not
these.
that bad. The neighbor just said this thing,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah,
How are you
denial.
right now?
I feel a little tender talking about it, feeling it. It feels good though to just talk about it, to not feel like it has to be something hidden. Yeah, it feels sort of nice just to be like, oh, I get to just tell you. I get to just tell you how it feels. I get to tell you that part of me feels sad when I think about that. And this is the thing that I think I used to be afraid of feeling,
Yeah.
that sadness and that tenderness.
Yeah.
I wanted to always just be able to like be okay. It's fine. It's not a big deal. And even as I say that, I can feel the incongruence. I can feel like my face making that face that says it's fine, the word saying it's fine, but I can feel in my body it's not fine.
Yeah.
And that's actually really neat to feel the difference, because now I know that, like, oh, like this is what's really going on. The
Yeah.
stuff coming out of my mouth saying it's fine and the smile I put on my face, like that's just the denial trying to protect me.
Yeah. That
Right.
makes sense.
But like when I can just tell you, like, oh, I feel like turning in my stomach, talking about this experience with you. And also I feel warmth in my heart that it can be something we can talk about. And it
Mm,
feels really lovely that you don't pull out all the atrocities of the world that are going on right now that are bigger than that, bigger than that. Um, because it makes it easier for me to not go back into denial.
yeah. Totally. Yeah. Self-protection.
Right. So,
Oh.
yeah,
Well, can I walk you through one of your own practices that you walk
sure.
us through so beautifully? And we'll
Let's
do
do
this for
that.
closing. Okay. Just going to move this little cat. So start by feeling your anchoring spot. It might be your bum or your feet or your hands. And you mentioned a few sensations you were experiencing.
Mhm.
So maybe put a hand somewhere on your body that feels nourishing. One of the sensations you identified was a churning in your stomach. Can you feel that churn there in your stomach?
I feel that churn shifting because I'm giving it some really nice breath right now.
Good. Okay, so churning, I can feel you shifting.
Churning, I can feel you shifting.
hmm And what about that warmth that you feel being able
Mm.
to share and be received? Where in your body do you feel that?
I feel that has shifted from from my heart to my face. Like I feel a warmth in my face. I feel
Mm,
just the experience and sensation of like being held, that it's okay to feel this churning in my stomach. It's okay to feel some of the sadness that came up.
mhm. Okay, so maybe warmth, I can feel you.
Warmth, I can feel you.
And sadness, I see you there too.
Mm, sadness, I see you there too.
So this moving warmth and churning and sadness are all here together, and I'm learning to be with them all.
Mm, sadness and churning and warmth. I can feel you all, and I'm learning to be with you all.
Give a little attention to your anchoring spots and your breath. Is there anything your body wants to do right now? Any
Yeah, it just
impulse?
wants to twist and move around. I felt a lot of spaciousness inside and like a real settling. I saw like the warmth and sadness and churning. They get to sort of just meld together and have a little playful dance together.
Really holding
Hmm.
space for yourself. It's powerful.
And there's like a little excited little girl in me that wants to do a little dance because like this works. It really works.
It really
I'm
does.
so used to facilitating it. And so to be on the other side and experience it, I'm like, oh, I feel like so much softening and so much permission to just be. And that I don't have to make any of those parts go away. I don't have to make any of them bigger or smaller. If I'm just practice being with them, they sort of move on their own.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. Thank you. That felt very nice.
Wonderful. I'm glad. Thank you, Gigi. Is there anything else you want to say about any of this before we sign off?
It's just a sweet reminder that we can have processed and worked through so many things in different ways. And we're just human, and you're going to feel things. If you're willing to be connected to your body, you're going to feel things. And how sweet it is to be with what comes up in a loving and gracious way. And to have
Also, it makes me annoyed. I love feeling compassionate grace towards myself, and sometimes I also feel just annoyed.
Yeah. Right
There's
now, I
room
don't
for
feel
that
annoyed.
too.
Right now,
Good.
I feel pleasant, and I feel very grateful. I feel very grateful that I've formed friendships in my life where we can have this kind of conversation. And where, if you're listening to this conversation, we didn't talk too much about all the details of things. We spoke actually very little about details of things, but we went from talking about the experience of it, and we just went to the body, and we went to like a loving holding of what's present. And on the other side of that is like, I feel sturdier, I feel more open, I feel more connected to you, I feel more connected to myself and the truth of my experience. And it reminds me the magic of not having to talk everything out in the ways we believe will help us. Talking about things is helpful. And also, so is slowing down and feeling it and letting someone else witness us in our feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. I tend to recognize now lots and lots of words and stories as being a diversion from some simple feelings, the trying to make things make sense energy is much less present in my life. It's really a gift.
Yeah. Trying to make sense energy. That's a good energy to notice. I had a lot of trying to make sense energy in my life. And it's really shifted to learning to be with energy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you. Okay, well, we'll resume the list. I think next episode we'll start, reaction formation is the next one on the list. So there's lots to talk about, no doubt.
Okay.
Okay, that's it for this week
All
then.
right.
Please like, follow, and subscribe. And if anything we've said here today has been helpful for you, please do share with somebody that you care about. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.